You know, as fishermen, there's a lot of obvious ways that we break our rods. No! But there's also a lot of unobvious ways that we damage our rods on a daily basis that leads to them breaking. We all start out with the ugly stick. You know, that rod you can fold in half and put in a trash can. It's basically unbreakable.
I gave it to our dog Sugar as a chew toy. Your mama, her husband back.
But as we progress as fishermen, we typically buy higher end rods and rods that cost a lot more money, and you think that you can just treat them the same way. And then what happens? We go out there fishing one day, we make a cast or we set the hook on a fish and the rod breaks. It snaps in half. And it's easy for us to just blame the manufacturer. I'm never gonna try another loose rod as long as I live. Them dowel rods are nice, but man, they just break all the time. Quantum rods absolutely suck. You know, I just really don't like those Kistler rods, man. They just break. It's easy for us to just blame the brand. So today I wanna talk about some things that you do to your rods that damage them and cause them to break. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. The first way that a lot of us damage our rods without even knowing it is we actually force the tip of our rod towards the butt of our rod. I love the way that the informative fisherman talks about this. He says, putting the rod at a negative angle. Basically what that looks like is if I pull this rod right here towards the butt, if I'm bending that, I mean, this is not good already. Don't break, don't break. This is putting the rod at a negative angle right here. I'm bending the tip towards the butt. There's a lot of different ways that we do this as fishermen, so let's talk about them. So one of the first things that we do, maybe you're a bank angler and you're getting ready to go to a new spot, maybe you fish on a boat and you're getting ready to strap your rods down, and what's the thing that we do? We reel that lure in, and it gets to be like this, right? Here's my hook keeper, here's my lure. So what do I do as a fisherman most of the time? I pull that down, right? I'm pulling that down, and as I'm doing that, I'm forcing the tip of that rod towards the butt of my rod. I'm creating that negative angle, and a lot of times that's going to cause some stress fractures in your rod, and that is a no-no. Now, another huge way that we put our rods at a negative angle is anytime we flip a fish in the boat. Here, I have a rock. This rock is roughly about 3.5 pounds. This is going to represent a bass or a fish. Here I go, I'm fighting my 3 to 4 pound fish. If I want to go to swing that fish in the boat, what I'm gonna do is grab towards the butt and I'm gonna flip it in the boat just like this. And see how I didn't go too vertical? The biggest thing I didn't do is create a negative angle. I didn't lift the fish straight up like this. The more of a negative angle that you create on this rod with the tip pointing towards the butt, the worse it's gonna be. You don't wanna do that. In my rod, $150 gone. Now, another way that we create that negative angle often with our fishing rod is when we set the hook. Not everybody does this, but some guys, they get a bite out there, they set the hook, and all of a sudden they just keep bringing that rod back, keep bringing that rod back. They never even start reeling, right? They just keep bringing that rod back. I know a professional angler who does this. He can break a lot of rods on the hook set. That's because he's bringing that rod super far back. I am now forcing the tip of my rod towards the butt of my rod, creating that negative angle, and the further back you go and that fish starts pulling, bam, that's when your rod is going to break. Mistake number 2 when it comes to damaging our rods that a lot of anglers make is we interfere with the rod's action. Every rod has a little bit different action to it. A moderate action means that that rod is going to be more of a parabolic bend. If you have a fast action rod, that typically means about 70 or 80% of that rod is backbone and just the tip of the rod bends. Now, if you interfere with that action while that rod is under some tension, under some weight, that is when that rod can break. Maybe you're landing a big fish on the side of the boat. You have a moderate action rod. If you grab that rod halfway through the rod or even closer to the tip to kind of bring that fish closer to you, you are interfering with the action of that rod. That rod was not designed to just bend on the tip. It's trying to absorb the energy through the entire rod. So now all of a sudden you force that rod to bend in a different way, and you're going to cause stress fractures. You're going to damage that rod by interfering with it. This happens a lot of times too when we flip a fish in the boat. You want to grab below that first guide of your rod to flip that fish in the boat. You also don't want to grab the rod way up here and pull it in like this. That also interferes with the action of the rod, which can cause it to break. Mistake number 3 when it comes to damaging our rods is simply just being lazy with the rod. So there's a lot of different ways that us as anglers are lazy with our rods, but there's a couple of ones that I see almost all of us anglers do, myself included, that can really damage the rods. The first thing that a lot of us do is we simply reel that lure to the tip of our rod instead of putting it on the hook keeper like this. Now, obviously, this can damage the ceramic insert that's on the rod itself. But the thing is, guys, is it does more than that. You know, if you're using a really heavy lure, maybe you're out there and you're using a 1.5 ounce weight to punch through mats, or maybe you're using a bigger swim bait, and maybe you go to a new spot on the lake and you strap the rod down with that lure just hanging off the front deck of your boat. Now all of a sudden what you're doing is you're putting all the weight of that lure on the very tip of your rod, because the rest of the rod is being supported by the front deck, but the tip of it is hanging off, and now that lure is bouncing all the way down as you're going to the next spot, and it's causing stress fractures in that rod. And even worse than just laying it on the carpet is sometimes we lay it off the side of our boat, right? We lay it on the gunnel of the boat, and so it's sticking out over the gunnel, and it doesn't even have to be a heavy lure at this point. It can be a 1/2 ounce bait or a 3/4 ounce bait, and maybe you're running down the lake and it's just bouncing on that hard fiberglass or aluminum boat, whatever it is, and you're just simply just damaging that rod. You get to the next spot, you go to cast, and your rod tip breaks off. So don't be lazy, don't just reel it to the tip like this. Now, another way that we're really lazy with our rods is, again, we go to move to a new area and we simply just lay our rods down real quick and put a strap over top of them. And guys, if the rods are all laying at weird angles, you know, maybe the reel was actually laying on the carpet or the handle was laying on the carpet, I've seen that before. What tends to happen is now you have a strap that's putting pressure on that rod, making it bend in a weird way. Or even worse yet, you leave the rod like that and one of your buddies steps on that rod and the reel's on the carpet. It's gonna put a lot of pressure on that rod and it can cause it to break right then. If not, it's going to fracture it where it can break later. The last mistake that a lot of us anglers make is we use the wrong rod for the lure that we're using, whatever it may be. For instance, right here I have an Akuma Psycho Stick. This is actually my favorite rod right now, but it actually says on it that it's rated for a 1/4 ounce to 3/4 ounce lure in weight. To me, I would think that this rod is actually strong enough that I could throw a little bit bigger swim baits, or I could even actually punch with this rod an ounce and a half weight. And really, I feel like it would do just fine. But that rod says right there, it's not really rated to handle that type of weight. So therefore, if I go out there and I use this rod with a big weight or a big swim bait or something that maybe I shouldn't, maybe it's an ounce spinner bait, whatever it may be, if I go out there and do that and I go to cast this rod and it breaks, I have no excuse besides I used the wrong rod with the lure that I was using. So make sure you pay attention to the rod specifications on there. I know that this might require you to having to buy a couple more rods. It's also going to help you to not break as many as well. There's a lot of other ways that we damage our rods, but those are some of the most popular ways. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Go ahead and set the hook on that thumbs up button. Leave a comment below if you have a question, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.